People used to kind of like turn away from Detroit music. You know, they felt as though the beats were corny, or y'all rapped off beat, or y'all rapped too fast.
And it seemed like it never got mainstream. Like, it just only would go to Detroit and other Midwest cities, and that was it.
They blackballed us for a long time, bro. They ain't want to let us in them doors, man.
They was hating. And like, Detroit got them, they ain't want to open the doors for us, but we kicked that bitch down.
These days, the Detroit rap scene is on top of the world. People from all different sides of the city, as well as surrounding cities like Flint and Ypsilanti, are seeing success, and the state of Michigan as a whole has one of the strongest movements in all of rap. But 10 years ago, Detroit was miles away from the mainstream spotlight. And 20 years ago, the city wasn't even an afterthought when it came to hip-hop music. But as early as the end of the 90s, a movement was forming, and throughout the years, more and more artists pushed it further until it got to the point that it's at today. So in this video, we'll take a look at everything that had to happen for Detroit to get to where it's at today. But first, let's get into the intro. The success of Detroit is tied to its unique sound. Detroit beats can be described as dark and up-tempo, with melodies typically containing pianos, strings, and bells, and a combination of funk bass and 808s. This style has roots stretching all the way back to the 90s. If you go back and listen to Detroit music from this period, you'll hear similarities to the current sound. They use a lot of strings and funk basses, as well as simple piano melodies. The production at this time was very similar to the sound of the Bay Area, and some Detroit natives argue that the Bay got the sound from Detroit, but most acknowledge that they were inspired by the Bay.
Like, a lot of people relate like Detroit music to like Oakland music and West Coast music. I know, as far as my part in it, I always looked up to Too Short beats, and I always looked up to E40, and used to listen to Spice One a lot. So
the Detroit sound also drew inspiration from down in Louisiana. You can hear this in the aggressive pianos and the drum style in early 2000s Detroit beats. There were two big groups in Detroit from the 90s and early 2000s who most people credit with starting the Detroit movement in rap. One group was called the Street Lords, and the other was called the Cheddar Boys. The Street Lords were from the west side of Detroit, while the Cheddar Boys were from the east. Both groups became superstars in the city and the faces of Detroit rap. However, in the ego-driven sport of hip-hop, it takes virtually nothing at all to start a beef between two groups. And these two groups got into a beef over the Cheddar Boys taking the Street Lords' original name. A beef that would set the trend in Detroit of Eastside versus Westside. Unfortunately, this beef over what started as a small disagreement took a serious turn when a rapper named Wipeout, who was the leader of the Cheddar Boys, was boomed and ended up losing his life. Cheddar Boy associates blamed the Street Lords and ended up spinning back and taking the life of Blade Icewear, the leader of the Street Lords and the most beloved rapper in the entire city. This tragic set of events killed the momentum of the city. Both groups faded out and there was a void until another group named Doughboyz Cashout started making noise. Doughboyz Cashout was a group of kids from the west side of Detroit who formed their group while they were still in high school. Their most notable members were Payroll Giovanni and HBK. They put out their first mixtape in 2008, and soon they were well known throughout the city. Doughboyz Cashout was kind of like a revival for the city. Although Eminem was the mainstream representation of Detroit at this time, and Big Sean was coming up, they had a different wave and didn't embody the Detroit sound. The streets didn't have any representation. Doughboyz Cashout filled this void and brought a new young energy. They continued the legacy of dark beats with hard piano melodies, funk bass, and strings, as well as the Louisiana style of drums. And they sped the tempo up more, getting closer to the modern, up-tempo Detroit sound. One of the producers Doughboyz Cashout worked with was named Helluva, and he would go on to produce major hits and play a big role in creating the modern Detroit sound. The Doughboys went on to attract attention from outside the city and eventually ended up signing with Jeezy's label CTE in 2013. But they never reached the mainstream and eventually went their separate ways. But while the Doughboys were in the middle of their prime in the early 10s, more groups began popping up. The two biggest were Team Eastside and the Green Guys. The Green Guys were a group of rappers from the east side of Detroit who for themselves in the early 10s. The most notable member was Icewear Vezzo. The second big group was Team Eastside. This group contained several rappers who would be around for the next 10 years. People like Peezy, Babyface Ray, and to a lesser extent, Dame Dot. Other hot names around this time were the Stun Hard Hot Boys and a solo rapper named Pablo Skywalker. By this time, the Detroit sound had solidified into its own, and the Green Guys, Team Eastside, and Doughboyz Cashout were still pushing it further. However, the theme of East vs West rivalries would flare up again in the form of a beef between Doughboyz Cashout and Team Eastside and the Green Guys. The beef turned violent in a situation that resulted in the Green Guys running into HBK, the Doughboyz, jumping him, knocking him out, and taking his chain. Luckily, this was the farthest the beef went, and everybody was able to squash things, and they even collaborated on songs in the future. In the mid-10s, the influence of drill was being felt, and rappers like Yaya Jordan and Dex Osama were two of the hottest rappers in the D, mixing drill elements with the traditional sound. However, things ended up badly for both of these rappers. Dex Osama ended up getting boomed, and Yaya caught a 33-year sentence. It was also in the mid-10s that a group called Band Gang emerged into the spotlight in the city. Band Gang was a group of friends from the west side of Detroit, the biggest being Lonnie Benz, Pay Will, and Mazzo. The city loved Band Gang and it grew to be one of the biggest groups out at the time. But in future years, many of their members would be plagued by prison time and death. Another rapper who blew up during this time was Cash Kid. Cash Kid brought a sense of humor to his music, as well as witty bars and punchlines, and this set him apart a lot from other Detroit rappers. The biggest Detroit rapper to blow in these years was Dej Loaf, but she had a different sound and was separate from the main Detroit movement. Now, up until this point, Detroit had developed its own music scene with a unique style and sound and its own stars. But these rappers weren't known outside of Michigan and the surrounding areas. However, in 2017, all of this changed. A rapper named T Grizzly had just got out of prison and decided to take rap seriously. He got a beat from Helluva and dropped a song called First Day Out, and the rest is history. The song went crazy, and T became the first Detroit rapper to blow with the Detroit sound. Now there was a wider audience outside of the city who had been introduced to the sound and was looking for more similar artists. And more new artists started coming out and gaining buzz. One of these, who T Grizzly would end up signing, was Sada Baby, aka Scuba Steve, hands down the best dancer in rap. Sada Baby's eccentric personality and unique style of rapping set him apart, and he quickly started gaining notice with the song called Stacy. He continued to blow up, dropping songs like 2K17 and Block Party, growing a large fan base. Another artist who blew up at this time was Snap Dogg. Snap had more of a drill influenced sound and ended up signing to Lil Durk. Now at this time, T Grizzly was the hottest, but after him, arguably one of the hottest artists in the city was a girl named Molly Brazy. She was doing big numbers with songs of her own like Trust None and More Facts, as well as multiple collabs with Cuban Dog, all with millions of views on YouTube. Other hot names during this time were Drago, Benno, and All-Star JR. One artist in particular from this period who would go on to see more success than basically everybody else was 42 Dugg. In 2017, 42 Dugg came home and started rapping, instantly becoming top 5 in the city, pound for pound, to touch a mic. Things took off quickly, and by 2018, he was one of the hottest up-and-coming artists in the city. Cash Doll also blew up around this time, but similar to Big Sean and Dej Loaf, she had a different sound and was separate from the main Detroit rap movement. In 2019, Detroit had another big year, and a new genre of Detroit rap blew up. Scamming and credit card fraud had been popular in Detroit for years. Band Gang started the trend of rapping about it in songs, and smaller artists have started making it into a genre. In 2019, TJX6 and Cash Shaquan blew up and took scam rap to new heights with their song Dynamic Duo. TJ capitalized on this new clout, dropping hits like Dark Web and Blackmail. He dropped songs literally reading out methods over beats, as well as giving detailed stories about swiping, probably saying way more information than he should have. TJ and Casher weren't the only ones getting shine from scam rap though. 30 minutes away, a group called the Shitty Boys was also on the scam rap wave. The Shitty Boys was a group of 3 friends from Ypsilanti, Michigan, who started rapping in high school, with the starter group being Babytron. They didn't go into detail like TJ, but they did talk about scamming a lot, mentioning things like punches, slides, dumps, pins, and profiles. And they also dropped some big songs and got lit during this period. Scam rap was blowing up during this year, but scam rappers weren't the only ones getting on at the time. Baby Smoove was also blowing up with his more laid-back style, dropping hits like Acorn and Babe. And V's was also starting to get a buzz in the city. Also this same year, a Flint rapper called Rio Da Yung OG dropped a song called Legendary and blew up, taking the game by storm, and continued doing numbers and establishing himself as the top rapper in Flint. In 2020, more rappers from Flint followed Rio and put a new spotlight on the city. RMC Mike was Rio's right-hand man, and they collaborated frequently, so Mike began to grow a following as well. Y&J and Louis Ray made a name for themselves with songs like Coochie, Coochie Land, and Triple S, bringing humor and a unique style to their raps. Also in Flint, B.A.B. the Pac-Man blew up with his song Free Joe Exotic, saying the wildest imaginable things you could ever say on a song that was downright hilarious. All of these rappers got most of their beats from a producer named Energy, who can be credited for a large part of the new style that was emerging. In 2020, Flint was having its own mini movement, and the Detroit movement at large was bigger than it had ever been before. Rappers like Babyface Ray, Icewear Vezzo, and Peezy, who were almost a decade into their careers, were the biggest they had ever been. Sada Baby was continuing to drop new hits and getting bigger and bigger, and 42 Dugg had signed with Lil Baby and ascended all the way to the top of the mainstream. On top of this, you had new artists like FWC Big Key starting to be noticed in the city. The Detroit sound was known all across the country, and Lil Yachty decided to put even more light on the scene when he dropped Michigan Boy Boat, an album with mostly Detroit beats featuring the majority of the popular artists in the city at the time. In the following years, the Detroit movement has continued to grow bigger and bigger. From the late 90s all the way to 2022, the Detroit rap scene went from being completely invisible to nearly everyone outside the city limits, to one of the biggest movements in hip-hop. Artists in the city used to feel disrespected and excluded from mainstream hip-hop, but they stayed true to themselves and continued to grind, and eventually, the world noticed.